opinions expressed on this program are the views of the host and not necessarily the views of the University of Missouri St. Louis or this station.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another installment of That Science and Nature Show. I'm your host, Jeremy Howard. Joining me this week, as always, the Queen of Tarantulas, Becky Hansis O'Neill.
How's it going?
And returning to the podcast, Jenn Voss from UMSL Sustainability. Yeah! So hopefully we'll also have James Ott rejoining us well later in the show. Webster is out this week, which is totally fine. We'll have a great show for you. We're going to talk about wildlife trafficking in the news. We're going to talk about cheetah reintroduction and clashing with indigenous tradition in the news. And we're going to talk about rebranding slugs and snails. And that feeds nicely into our topic of the show this week, which is all about gardening. And we have Jenn, and potentially James, coming on to talk about the UMSL Community Garden, as well as our own experience with gardens and other aspects of gardening now that it's getting warmer out. It's getting, be springtime. And we'll do outside of science as we always do. But first, in the news, our first story comes to us from good old... Well, it's not really good old. Actually, I don't think we've ever had a story from this place before. It's from the good old Department of Justice, our regular news provider.
Office of Public Affairs.
Yes, this is quite an interesting case, listener, so perk your ears up. So, title of this is Montana Man Pleads Guilty to Federal Wildlife Trafficking Charges as part of a years-long effort to create giant hybrid sheep for captive hunting. So, the idea is this. In good old Vaughn, Montana, which I've heard Montana is quite a lovely place, but I feel like it's remote enough where you can get away with this sort of thing.
Yeah, I agree with this, yes.
And an individual named Arthur, quote-unquote, Jack Schubarth, is an 80-year-old man who basically, for the last 7 or 8 years, has been trying to breed what's referred to as alternative livestock, which are just sheep that have been basically impregnated with sperm from sheep sheep sperm brought abroad from, I can't pronounce the name of this country, I'm going to botch it. Or is it Kyrgyzstan?
Yes.
Kyrgyzstan. Impregnating sheep basically to have them be sold for more to his co-conspirators or other hunters or game enthusiasts or that. And it sounds like this operation has been going on for quite some time. And the males that he was using, he basically was from a species of sheep named the Marco Polo Argali, which is like a very hefty mountain sheep from Kyrgyzstan, and is referred to as the Montana Mountain King, or MMK. And again, using that sperm, he was trying to impregnate ewes, which are the female sheep, to create these like hybrid animals that are worth more on the wildlife trafficking markets, as it were.
Well,
or no.
So this is all predicated on game farm industry.
Okay.
I'd say in Missouri we have some, but I usually think of Texas when I think of these places. So you have these big fenced-in areas, and they bring in exotic game, and you go pretend you're on safari and pay to shoot them. So he was trying to make some fancy sheep to go to these game farms.
Okay.
So that part isn't trafficking so much as the weird part of the story, which I think you were getting into.
Yeah. The big thing seems to be... There's a lot to unpack here, so try to scroll the right part. Basically, the court documents from the Department of Justice describe how Schubarth illegally obtained the genetic material, so the sperm from hunted wild bighorn sheep, and purchased parts of these wild hunted sheep in violation of the Montana law, which is part of the Lacey Act, which, if you don't know what that is, that basically means that you cannot buy or trade animals or plants that have been obtained illegally through whatever means, which in this case they very much were. And I'm blanking on what the part I'm supposed to be getting to is, Becky.
Oh, yeah. So the bizarre part of this case was that this fancy sheep from Kyrgyzstan, he was able to get parts of the sheep and get them to the United States. So no semen, no whole sheep, nothing like that. He worked with a lab to get genetic samples from those parts and clone them, put those embryos in just regular old ewes, sheep, domestic sheep, and then got this Montana Mountain King male where he's able to sell sheep sperm and do all this breeding. And this is the first time I've ever heard of someone importing a part of an animal, cloning it, and then moving on from there.
Oh,
so
okay.
That is the crazy part of this story.
Yes.
It's the first time hearing something that backdoor, I guess, is trafficking.
Well, and it's so that's going to be so wildly expensive. Yeah. And what do you tell the lab? You're like, oh yeah, this was my favorite pet sheep.
How do you find the lab to do that?
I mean,
my hang up.
I think the article said there's 5 co-conspirators, so maybe someone in the lab is one of the co-conspirators. Someone on the inside got a mole, or an inside job.
Yeah, maybe so.
I mean, it does seem like it has to go pretty deep though, because it can't just be one rogue guy. Like you have to have people to get away with this for 7, 8 years.
Yeah, you got to get the sheep parts. Obviously, the sheep grew up from a baby once they cloned it, plus
Yeah.
all the people at the lab.
I feel like there's a great movie in here somewhere in like a
There's
decade
gotta
that we'll
be
see.
some passion, some personal motivation behind this to do that.
Exactly.
Yeah, I find this like biohackery science super fascinating, just of like people kind of doing their own thing in their own labs, whether it's ethical, legal is a whole other conversation, but
Yes.
just they're taking the initiative to do so, which I find in and of itself kind of fascinating.
Yeah. I want to know the rest of the story because who is this guy? Because he sounds like an 80-year-old rancher from Montana
He
that
is.
breeds game species as like part of a business. He doesn't sound like a crazy geneticist.
Yeah, I mean, clearly he knows enough about biology to do this, so yeah.
Or
This
he's
is a Netflix special one day for sure.
I think so. Instead of Tiger King, it would be like Sheep King or something.
Oh man.
Or
Yeah.
Montana Mountain King.
Yeah, that would work. Montana Mountain King. Indeed. But I guess we'll find out in the coming months how this plays out. I'm hoping we find out who these co-conspirators are, because if he rats on them, then we get more stories out of this.
Yeah, maybe we can do like if we see more news about this, we could do some little updates on the
Yes.
saga of the Montana
It's
Mountain
time for
King
the
sheep.
Montana Mountain King update.
It's time.
That'd be fascinating. All right, well, we'll put a pin in that for now, and we'll move on to our second news story today, which comes to us from Atlas Obscura, which is a regular news source I use from time to time. This is about India's cheetah reintroduction threatening the indigenous tradition. So there's a bit of a setup here. Bear with me. There is an area of central India which is now known as Kuno National Park, which in the 1990s was still land used by the indigenous people, which are blanking on the name. What is the name? Here we go. The Saharia people, excuse me, were indigenous people of that land that later became Kuno National Park. And the idea is that years ago they tried to basically remove the people from the land because they needed to reintroduce Asiatic lions, I think it is the name of it. And they're like, hey, we're going to reintroduce this like major apex predator into this area. It's not really safe for you to be here. We'd like you to like leave and kind of relocate you into outside the forest. However, for the indigenous people there, the forest is super crucial for their way of life, for their culture, for agriculture, for food, all these aspects of who they are. And kind of they've been slowly displaced over the years. And the mountain lion or the Asiatic lion thing never actually ended up happening. They ended up getting relocated despite no lions being reintroduced. And now it's sort of happening again, but with cheetahs from South Africa, weirdly enough. So they're not really like native to the area, but they're being relocated. The cheetahs are being relocated to central India. And again, they're kind of displacing more and more people. So it's kind of this unfortunately losing battle that the natives are fighting to have access to this land, despite now being sort of removed from it, because they still like to go back into the forest area and access the land and these trees, which produce a lot of their vital products and agricultural aspects and all of that. So kind of interesting conundrum here, like a conservation thing kind of butting up against, indigenous culture. What did we think about this?
I don't know if I thought so much about indigenous culture as because we have some of these similar issues, I guess, in the United States where you have like wolf and grizzly bear reintroduction out
Right.
west. We don't use eminent domain and move people.
Right.
I think what got me about this is that the Asiatic lions were never reintroduced, and the cheetahs are doing really poorly.
Yes, that was something I forgot to note.
Yeah. So, and the government gave all these folks incentives to move. Like, you can move somewhere else. We promise you'll have good cropland and access to hospitals and schools. And the cropland sucked. It wasn't any good.
Yeah.
And they still have to hike back in to harvest frankincense from all these trees. So I thought, wow, this was just kind of mismanaged.
Yeah. Really, really sad. And it also just makes the government look bad. It just governments around the world kind of repeatedly making these mistakes of like, don't worry, great, good stuff will be where we're gonna move you. It'll be fine, and then we treat them like garbage, and then like we just see this again and again, kind of in history. Unfortunately, the United States is incredibly guilty of this with their Native American people, also. So I'm not pointing to other countries saying they only do this. The United States is very guilty and very culpable. So, Jen, any thoughts on?
I would say it kind of touches on the idea that humans don't really see themselves as part of a natural environment. Like, maybe the lions and the people were there in the past and they can do it again, or we don't approve of that now, or that doesn't work anymore with the culture that's been going on. They don't account for lions anymore. I would say that removing the people is equally as harmful as trying to reintroduce something that doesn't belong there. So I don't know why they would. Yeah, I would say it just touches on the idea that people don't see themselves as being important to the ecosystem.
Yeah, I feel as humans we almost feel we're not necessarily above that, but we're moved from it.
Yeah.
Like we are like we go into the woods or we go into the wilderness. It's not really part of like who we are because we're so settled and we live in cities now and we're almost removed. We have that step removed from it. So that's a good point you brought up that we're not we don't see ourselves as part of nature anymore, despite that we are.
I wish they'd had some quotes from some of the folks that moved on what they thought about living with the lions. Like, were they actually bothered by that or not? If so, how much?
Yeah.
And with we'll give you better hospitals. It's like, well, what other kind of unforeseen health circumstances have come from removing them from their natural environment? What kind of, natural foods were helping their digestive system that they're now having to deal with? Natural medicines that they don't have access to anymore, having to adapt to like over the counter stuff. There's lots of small things that can add up when you remove culture from their environment.
Yeah. And real quick, we'll welcome James Ott to the show. James, welcome. You're on mic 3 right in front of you.
Hello, sorry I'm late.
No worries. You are here now. We're just wrapping up conversations on the second news article, and I think we're going to hop into the third one now that you're here. This comes to us from BBC, and this is all about rebranding snails, if you can believe it or not. There is a wildlife trust that plans to quote-unquote do an image makeover for slugs and snails. It is the Hertz and Middlesex Wildlife Trust and Royal Horticultural Society, which is a mouthful. And they are finding that with our snails, particularly our garden variety snails, literally in the gardens, that there's a lot of negative perceptions about them, and they want to ultimately kind of reframe and have people rethink about their relationships with these mollusks, which are what slugs and snails are. And quote, arm people with facts, as the organizers say, because these slugs and snails are ultimately kind of part of the cleanup crew, and they have sort of distributed this pamphlet, which I have looked at a little bit, and it is titled "Making Friends with Mollusk," which I find to be very cute. And it's all about gardening with slugs and snails. Has lots of breakdowns on like how we can show slugs and snails love, why they matter in terms of breaking down dead and gross plant tissue, and cycling nitrogen as part of the soil. All this useful stuff. Trying to make them look a little more charismatic, a little more, give them a glow up, as it were. So, what do we kind of think about this? Taking a somewhat perceived pest animal and, making it look better.
I love it. This reminds me of this book I read. Oh my gosh, of course I'm forgetting the title. Nature's Best Hope, which talks about conservation at your home and things you can do. And there's a whole chapter on how conservation has a marketing problem, and that, a lot of beneficial plants like milkweed have the word weed in it, which is normally associated with like, you need to rip that out of your garden. So I love this. I think we should. The book talks about renaming some of those plants into more, like, for example, the butterfly bush, which is an invasive species, sounds so pretty and beautiful. It makes you want to plant it versus like milkweed, which is really beneficial, but the name is just like, not that great. So I'm all about rebranding for the betterment of wildlife.
Yeah, I remember in a seminar class I took my very first year here, I learned that the definition of a weed is so like not defined that you could define any plant as a weed, quote unquote. So I remember asking the professor, so like if an oak tree is growing in the middle of a field, that could be classified as a weed, and they're like, yes, technically, like that's how vague it is.
Right.
But it has the negative connotation, which we think bad. Becky, would you like to glow up your tarantulas, give them a rebrand, or do you feel they need them?
They need any kind of branding. People don't even know why tarantulas are important in the environment. Yeah.
Okay, we can make you a pamphlet that says "Making Friends with Tarantulas."
Spoiler alert: the tarantulas don't actually want to be friends with you.
Yeah, I don't know if the snails do either, but it sounds nice.
I like snails. In my yard, there's slugs that eat my sunflower seedlings, so I have to like protect the seedlings until they're big enough, or the slugs eat them. But other than that, I don't have an issue with my mollusks.
Yeah, I never really thought much about them. Like I know they're kind of slimy and gross because they are literally slimy, and it's kind of how they move. But I never really thought them as much of. I never thought them as much of pest as people describe them. It says from the article that only a small fraction of about 150 species in the United Kingdom pose problems for gardeners. So the majority of them are pretty chill and just want to kind of hang out.
And yet, I have the sunflower eaters. I didn't think snails had a marketing problem. Slugs, I could see it. But snails are pretty cute.
I feel like I need to ask because I'm totally not sure. Slugs versus snails, what is the difference here? Is it literally just the shell? Like, because that's my dumb brain thinking that.
From what I understand, there might be slight differences, but
I mean,
Okay.
snails have that cute kids movie Turbo.
I have not seen that. I know of it though.
Yeah. I don't know. When I think of snails, I think of Benjamin Button and Beatrix Potter books. When I think
Okay.
of slugs, I think, well, time to go to the garden store. Time to plant new stuff.
Real quick, what's Turbo about? I haven't seen it.
A fast snail, maybe?
Yes.
I mean, I glean that much, but I mean, like, what's the general plot?
Well, have you seen Cars?
I've seen bits and pieces of Cars.
It's Cars, but with snails.
Okay.
A little bit. Yeah, it's this snail wants to go fast, and everyone makes fun of him for wanting to go fast because he's a snail. He's supposed to go slow. And then one day he accidentally falls into the nitro boost tank of somebody's race car.
Which is like a superhero origin story.
And he becomes Turbo, and he races, and he wins. It's like a horse girl movie for snails. Like he wins the big race, and then he gets accepted, and he can race now. He's a race car.
Don't actually drop snails into nitro.
Don't do that.
Yeah, that will absolutely kill the
Don't do
snails
that.
in real life.
It's pretty cute. So if you need to acclimate your children to snails, go ahead watch Turbo.
Okay. I mean, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like,
I mean, as long as I know that superhero origin stories are unsafe.
yeah, as our villain origin stories. Yeah, don't. Well, I mean, I guess Batman doesn't have superpowers, but Batman has a very tragic past to become who he is.
It's also dangerous.
Yes, don't take inspiration from superheroes to get your superhero origin story. That's the message of that. All right. Any last thoughts on rebranding snails or rebranding animals in general?
I mean, I've heard of people renaming. Like, there's this movement to rename birds who have like people's names to more like generic names, like Arthur's warbler or whatever. Like, just any name to like yellow, like something more descriptive.
Oh,
I've heard of that, and
Okay.
that makes more logical sense to me, as
Yeah.
opposed to like, I think many things in the conservation world need better marketing, I guess. Like, whoever did the marketing for honeybees, can we get in touch? Because there are honeybee stickers and honeybee everything everywhere.
yeah. Honeybees get a lot of good press
Yeah.
because they are pollinators and they also give us honey, but they're not the only ones. They're more efficient ones, as I've learned from this program.
Yeah.
All right, with that, we're going to wrap up the news, and we'll be right back with topic of the show. Stay tuned.
UMSL Pre-Med Society is a student organization to help all pre-medical students explore their future endeavors. We host events all semester for students to indulge in the knowledge of medicine. Plenty of events are available for students to attend and familiarize themselves with their future career path, such as blood drives, spokespersons, speaking with medical students or residents, and more. The UMSL Pre-Med Society would help pre-med students at UMSL to explore their dream and engage with other individuals within the same field. Search Pre-Med Society on Try to Connect for more.
And we're back. And now it's time for topic of the show, where we talk about a pre-selected topic that I have chosen in advance. This week, since it's about to be spring, or we're on the doorstep of spring just about, we're going to talk about gardening. So it's getting warmer out. There's lots of opportunities to start planting things. James Jenner here as well to talk about the UMSL Community Garden, which is an absolutely amazing opportunity at UMSL to get involved with gardening if you live in an apartment like me or you have no gardening experience. Also, like me. And I know, Becky, as well, you have done gardening around your house and probably before you moved here to St. Louis, yes?
Yeah, but I wasn't very successful in New Mexico. It's a lot easier to grow things in Missouri.
Okay, well, that's fair. So I guess I'll just start out. Conversation is just in general in your life. What's your experience with gardening or not gardening?
My grandpa and my dad always kept tomato gardens, so now I keep a tomato garden.
Okay.
So yeah, tomatoes. I know a lot about tomatoes. That's
That's-
pretty much it.
Yeah, that's similar to mine. My dad always had the little tomato garden every summer. That, sorry, Dad, it did not do well. He was just not didn't have a green thumb. So I wasn't really involved with plants until I got here at UMSL. I super into like native plants, biodiversity, things like that. Um, so I got involved with the garden to kind of get involved with that aspect of it. The community garden also has like 5 acres of a little nature preserve, and um, I ended up getting introduced to the garden itself, and it's been so fun. Which I'm happy to talk about in this segment about like just the questions about gardening because there's so many unanswered questions, and it's just I don't know, it's just exciting. So I'm ready.
How about you, Becky? I know you alluded to a little bit a moment ago.
So I started a pollinator garden here at my house in St. Louis, and I've been really having a good time with that. I might try some veggies this year. I got some blackberries in last year. So yeah, I'm an aspiring native plant pollinator garden person.
Cool.
It's like the balance between. I feel like when I always thought of gardening, I thought of vegetables, but there is native gardening as well. You can grow stuff for bees, not just food. So.
I got so many cool bees. Last year was so exciting.
Yeah, my gardening experience is pretty minimal. Like, I remember when I was really little in Virginia, my mom had a garden, but that didn't last very long. I don't think she wanted to, like, put forth the effort into it, so it just kind of died off and was, like, a lot in our backyard. And then, like, most of my gardening experience didn't exist because my dad made me do a lot of, like, landscaping yard work, so, like, mulching and, like, digging and stuff, but not, like, growing things. So, like, I'm used to, like, being in the dirt, but not actually growing things, I guess is the easiest way to describe that. And then I feel like most of my exposure has been, since I started learning about bees as a PhD student here. And the cool thing I've gotten to do through my field research, which last summer I basically went all around St. Louis and like collected bees at various parts around the city. And the big thing I got to see was like all the community gardens in like Old North and like Soulard and stuff. I'm like, this is so cool. There's like these little microcosms of nature in all of the concrete and tall buildings and stuff. So that was really eye opening for me that you don't just have to live in like the suburbs or like have a farm in the agricultural area. Like you can have a garden like in a city. That was kind of eye opening to me.
Right.
So, James, do you want to talk a little about the UMSL Community Garden and what that's like here and how people can get involved?
Yes, there's a lot to cover.
Go for it.
The exciting part is we're basically just getting started. We haven't really planted anything yet outside just because it's still, even though we've had like these warm temperatures, it's still a little iffy on planting stuff. So we're gonna wait until probably next week. But if you want to get involved, please go to Triton Connect. We're going to post our official hours for the spring semester by the end of the week. So that's how you can get involved. We have volunteer hours usually in the mornings throughout the week. And yeah, you don't have to have any experience. I didn't have any experience. I kind of just showed up to the garden and was like, okay, I'm ready to learn. What do I do? And that's what I'm still doing. It's a garden is not a perfect art. It's just kind of you go at it and you kill things and you grow things and um, you're learning every day. So that's I don't know. I don't know if I have any specific advice, but
I just like that you kill things and you grow things and you learn things.
That's
That is
basically it.
gardening
Yeah.
in a nutshell.
at the end of the day. Yeah, I will say when I work with a lot of volunteers who come, and a lot of them don't have any garden experience, and they're always asking me like, "Oh, what is this? Like, how do I do this?" Or they seem so worried. And what I've realized about gardening is like, you're not gonna hurt the plants. Like, I mean, you can't, but it's hard to. Like, just rip things out and cut things, and if it dies, it's okay. It's if you don't kill things, you're not a true gardener, because like,
Oh.
in order for things. So like when people say they have a green thumb, I'm like, or they don't have a green thumb. Like they kill all their plants. I'm like, really, you're a gardener because like a gardener kills their things. But then they learn from it and try and keep them alive. So
Yeah.
if you say you have a black thumb, just keep going. Just keep.
Oh, is that the opposite of a green thumb? I didn't know there was a term for that.
Yeah, that's people say a black thumb.
Okay.
I figured out some good ways to get free plants so then I feel less bad.
Right.
Then if I can get a free plant, I'll just put it somewhere and say, may the odds be ever in your favor. And
Right.
just
Right.
carry on.
Well, speaking of free plants, at Sustainability, who's kind of taken over the garden and runs it for now. Tomorrow, actually, here in the MSC, we're gonna have a seed swap, so you don't have to have seeds. It's more of like a seed giveaway, if I'm honest. So just come here and get some seeds. We have vegetables, flowers, mainly vegetables though. And then in addition to that, what I've been super excited for with Sustainability, and please add on, Jen, if you have anything. We've been working on Feed the People project. So we had
Student social workers.
student social work. They approached us earlier in the semester and wanted to start this project, so we were super happy to help. We had somebody donate like boxes of seeds, just like tons of seeds, all these vegetables. So we've been growing them in the greenhouse, with the help of the biology department, who's been generous enough to have some greenhouse space to grow those. So we planted, I believe, over 25K seeds. We were trying to go for 60K for the UMSL 60 years, but we realized we're like, okay, quality over quantity. Let's do what we can manage. But our seedlings are doing great. We actually really need to transplant some. So we have a lot of tomatoes and, your general garden stuff, cucumbers. So also keep an eye out for that, because the whole goal of this project is to feed the people, to grow as many seeds as possible and give them away. So we already have partnerships with a few organizations like Seed St. Louis, who works with a lot of those community gardens you talked about in the area. So distributing all those plants. And then we'll also have some giveaways here at UMSL. So just, if you're an UMSL student, just keep on Triton Connect, because that's where most of our stuff gets posted about that.
Nice. I've never actually done a seed swap. Is the idea just like, I have these tomato seeds, you have some cucumber seeds, we can kind of diversify our portfolio plant-wise?
Yes,
Okay.
generally in like the plant community. Although this one, it's more of a seed giveaway. We have so many seeds. We're just here to give them away. And I mean, if you have something that we don't, please bring it. But we kind of have everything. So.
And if you're looking for cheap plants or free plants, if you hop on Facebook, I know I'm a millennial. There's the St. Louis Native Plant Swap group, and I'm sure there's more veggies and other plant groups. So basically, people will host plant swaps at their house where they're just giving away stuff that's overgrowing in their garden. So if you don't have a bunch of money to invest in new plants, there are other ways in the community to get free stuff.
Oh yeah, that's what I love about the gardening community, is especially those Facebook groups.
Yeah.
The amount of times I told my partner, I'm like, okay, I'm meeting with a stranger to pick up some plants, and he's like, please don't die. I'm like,
Well, it's always some nice little old
it
ladies
is
that-
always, yes. I'm like, I am safe. Trust me.
What types of stuff have you guys grown in the UMSL community garden? Because I have been there before. Like, I actually sampled for bees there last summer. You guys had a lot of bees, so good job on that. But what types of stuff have you grown?
We've grown a ton of stuff. We've grown bok choy there before. We've grown our okra or opera. Either way, we're real tall. We got like just baskets and baskets of okra to donate. Tomatoes, peppers did really well. Eggplants did, kale, artichokes, watermelon, cantaloupe, cucumbers, zucchini. Tried a bunch of. There's some other collard greens.
I'm getting hungry.
Yes. We had so many tomatoes last year. It was crazy. Yeah, we donate. The other cool thing about the garden is whatever the volunteers don't take, of course, that's your payment for volunteering. You get to pick stuff. But we do donate all the extras to the Triton Pantry here. And I remember at the end of the season just bringing in bags, not actual bags, but just mounds of tomatoes. And I'm like, I'm so sorry. Like, I'm happy I'm donating these, but I'm so sorry I'm like putting you in charge of 200 tomatoes to distribute. But
if you ever want to drop some of the biology department, I'm sure the grad students will be happy to
Yes,
take some
okay,
free
okay.
vegetables.
So here's your greenhouse. Here's a bunch of tomatoes that are about to go bad. Please eat them now.
Absolutely. Yes.
I know professors in the past have done that. They've been like, I've had extra whatever in my garden. Here's a bunch of stuff in the kitchen. It's like, all right, they'll make us with a recipe with this. Take some of this.
We have seen offerings being left. Like somebody will take like a plant or some turnips or something, and they'll just leave like a store bought spaghetti squash.
Yeah, that has happened.
Like they're trying to trade off.
We kind of have like the, if you didn't plant it, don't pick it. Like if of course, if you need food, please come get it. But we do distribute to the Triton Pantry. But yeah, we've had some stuff like that. We had a melon bandit last semester. We were so excited about our cantaloupes and watermelons, and somebody kept taking our cantaloupes and putting them in the like concrete cinder blocks, the squares, so they'd like grow into it, which like I don't know if you guys have seen it. Those like pictures of the square watermelons from China, which like are super cool, but doesn't really work in a cinder block that you can't get it out. So we lost a few to that. And
did you catch the melon bandit?
We did not.
Okay, I was
so
hoping
if you're the
like
melon bandit and you're listening,
the story.
Please leave them alone.
I did end up just because it was stuck in there, and we're not going to break the cinder blocks, but I did just cut it open and sit down and eat it with the spoon.
We did, yeah.
That's pretty great.
It's a little feast, a little treat, a little end of the day treat.
I mean, at that point, you kind of have to make lemonade out of lemons, because if you can't get it out, you might as well enjoy it, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it was really good too. So I don't know if cinder blocks do something to melons, but it was very sweet.
Yeah.
So for new gardeners, people are hoping to acquire a green thumb. Do we have any tips that you should give them? Just getting into gardening, trying things out, maybe some do's and don'ts at the community garden level, or Becky on your individual level, what you've learned.
Definitely talk to all the little old ladies on Facebook.
Absolutely.
I've picked up plants from people, and they'll tell me exactly how to transplant and take care of that thing. Their advice is usually pretty good.
Yeah, the first step is finding a community for you, because you are not alone in the gardening world. So many people enjoy gardening, and there's different ways of doing it. But if you find your little group that can show you the ways and set you up for success, it really doesn't take anything. I mean, realistically, you can just throw seeds on the ground and hope something comes up. Of course, there's more to it, but you can start there. Honestly, like I mentioned earlier, gardening is it's trial and error. So just start. If you fail, try again. Learn what you can. Learn what you can from other people. If for me personally, I don't have a garden at my house other than native plants, just because it can be overwhelming to like run a whole garden by yourself. So join a community garden. Like if you're an UMSL student, come join us at the community garden, because I mean we already have all the supplies you need. We have the tools. We have the stuff we can teach you, and that way you don't have to spend any money, especially if if finances are a struggle. I mean, it's a perfect way to meet new people in your community and also get the supplies you need and learn how to do it.
Nice. And I'm glad you brought up fails, James, because I thought I'd introduce a fun little overview of just gardening fail stories I found online. So I'm not going to go through all of these, but there's a couple of them I read earlier I thought would be amusing to highlight.
Okay.
So these are just individuals who try to get into gardening, and then something didn't work out right for one reason or another, and then ultimately they didn't get what they wanted. So we'll share a couple, and these are little stories, so bear with me because I'll be doing a lot of reading. But this one is just called "You Reap What You Sow." So when I started gardening, I thought more nutrition I provided my plants, the better harvest I would get from my vegetable garden. I spent weeks collecting horse manure from various stables and placed it all on my garden beds. I stood there admiring all the hard work I had done and thought all the great harvest this was bound to produce. A few weeks later, I planted my garden, only for everything to turn yellow and die. I later found out the manure was contaminated with a broadleaf systemic pesticide which killed all my plants. I had to replace all the soil in my garden. Not a great way to start. Bottom line, you reap what you sow.
Oh no.
So be wary of pesticides or where you get soil or manure from, because they might have things in it that will kill your plants.
Yes, and over fertilizing. Yeah. That's definitely a thing as well.
That's what I went about when I heard that.
Yeah.
All right. This next one is, and I would have gotten away with it if ... As a young man, I smoked a little of what Mother Nature provided. Yep, you guessed it. One day, without thinking, I discarded some seeds into my mom's garden. Needless to say, I was busted. So, next. Wait, what, Jen?
I was like, that'll do it.
Hey, it's an herb.
All right, this next one's called "What Did I Grow Again?" So as a teen, I was in love with the way gardening works. I watched my grandmother work in her garden and saw how dedicated she was regarding all of her plants. So when I returned to my parents' home, it was like an obsession for me to start my little garden. With much insistence, my father laid down the blueprint and began making a small space for me in the backyard. I had been too excited to consider what I was doing and ended up watching one YouTube tutorial. After that, I religiously worked on my plants, and when they finally grew big, I realized that I had no idea what I had sown and completely forgot to pluck the weeds. By the end of the gardening spree, my backyard was full of ugly weeds and plants I knew nothing about. So make sure you know what you're actually planting before you plant something. I think that's
Yes.
I've definitely forgotten what a few of the plants are in my garden. Because I've gotten some random thing from a plant swap and just put it in.
Yeah.
So I've done that.
I believe this is why we have the little like tag signs we put, like these are tomatoes, these are cucumbers, these are whatever.
Yes. Don't forget to label.
Yes, labeling is very important. Okay, this next one. My mother is very fond of fruit trees. So 2 years ago, we planted a guava tree in the backyard garden, and until last summer, it had grown nearly 10 feet as the plant is a hybrid variety. But in anticipation of more growth, we mixed 2 tablespoons of urea in 10 liters of water, dug a small hole near the tree's roots, and poured the urea water into that hole, which resulted in the withering of the tree in the next 20 days. That was a complete failure. After that, we planted a new guava tree.
Why did they use urea?
So, FYI for the listeners, urea is a major component in urine, also sweat. So it's basically pea water they're putting on the tree.
Did they think it needed like nitrates or something?
It didn't say. They didn't say in the story. I guess maybe they heard some like tip from a friend or like bad intel. I don't know.
I've heard in like permaculture groups, which those can be rabbit holes, so but some of them mention how they compost their urine, which I thought was interesting. I don't know how it works, but yeah, I guess you can use it. Some people do. Not there yet with my composting, but maybe someday.
Definitely not on campus. We don't do that.
Right. You don't fertilize your own plants. Alright, we'll do 2 more. Next one's called "If You Can't Handle the Heat, Get Out of the Kitchen." I ended up with a Rista after a visit to New Mexico and decided to plant some of the seeds after strong winds blew it down one evening and cracked open one of the peppers. Having no considerable gardening experience, I was pretty proud of myself when my little plant successfully grew a pepper. However, I had no idea that mature peppers are much spicier than their young counterparts, and I thought it was the opposite. So I was pretty surprised at how much punch the red pepper packed, making like really little. So basically, when you pick up the pepper when it's real small, it's much spicier than when it grows bigger.
Huh.
I actually didn't know this until I read the story. So
Or is it the opposite way?
wait, or did I misread that? I had no idea that mature peppers are much spicier than the young counterparts. Yes, you're right. So the bigger peppers are much spicier than the little ones. So thank you for that clarification. Again, I still learned something. I didn't know this. All right, we'll do one.
There's lots of vegetable plants, especially where you gotta pick at the right time. Like you want it to get the biggest. It's gonna taste the worst, maybe.
Yeah,
Like,
we
there's-
did. Some of our okra overgrew last semester, so we just had to let them go to seed. But that's okay. It's part of gardening.
All right, this last one is called "Right Plant, Wrong Place." Money plants are beautiful growers that can thrive both outdoors and indoors, and they can grow into beautiful vines. Once I had a home renovation project for a client, and I filled their space with money plants here and there. Little did I know that a couple of the naughty toddlers who had accidentally munched on one of the leaves and ended up with a terrible reaction. Not many people know that money plants are toxic for humans and can leave you with a blue and swollen mouth. Since then, I've stuck to non-poisonous plants even if there are no children in the house.
Huh.
What is a money plant? I've never heard this term.
It's a common house plant. I've had one before and I killed it, but it does not have money. I don't know.
So it's not a money tree. I can't just plant one and get a bunch of 20s.
Yeah, I think it has something to do with like luck and where it's originally from. But yeah, did they say they planted it outside?
They did, yeah.
Okay, they must be in like Florida or something because it's definitely a house plant. You could not plant that here.
Huh.
But yeah, that
I have some neighbors. tell you. They have been putting out cycads and bromeliads.
Really?
They may
Okay.
have brought them in the winter and put them back out,
Yeah.
but they're like in the soil in this xeriscaped kind of yard.
Wow.
And I'm like, this is different.
Is it one of those secret pots where they put a bigger pot in the ground?
Maybe.
I've seen those in my neighborhood. It's like there's just like this odd like plug-in plant kind of feel to it.
Yeah, whenever I walk by, I'm like, this is a weird place for a bromeliad.
Yeah. I do put my plants outside though during the summer, my house plants, and it helps so much with them growing. So please do that. Put your plants outside in the summer.
All right. As we get close to wrapping up this segment, I thought I'd ask one final thing. So, of course, you guys are UMSL Sustainability, and can you talk a little about, and also we and Becky can talk about this as well, how gardening is linked to sustainability and how that kind of has broader impacts overall.
Okay. I mean, I don't have like any like an article in front of me that confirms anything, but it I think it depends on the situation. I actually recently read an article about how sometimes your at-home garden can be this was like a controversial article about how at-home gardens can be unsustainable and how you can actually emit more emissions, um, which I still don't know if there's like confirmation on that. But I do think, yeah,
Incomparable.
but I think it all depends on how you go about it. Like if you just have a garden to yourself to grow some herbs and you're buying hundreds of bags from Lowe's of soil, like that's not going to be as sustainable as a community garden where people share supplies. And a lot of times there's like an app called Chip Drop where you can order like tree companies to just drop free mulch on your property basically. So like those are ways that you can lower impact, like get supplies from your own community. So yeah, as far as, and I would argue the case of like biodiversity. If you have a green space,
Yeah.
if you have a garden, it automatically adds green space. And if you're a good gardener, you'll add some plants for the pollinators and butterflies as well. You plant for yourself and for wildlife. So
Nice. Were you gonna say something, Jen, or?
I would say they have lots of, I like to call them feel-good benefits. So it's you're connecting with your community, you're appreciating your time outdoors more, you're like beautifying your space, you're gonna be a little more inclined to, maybe if you're gardening on the hill and you have neighbors who live on the hill above you, you might be inclined to ask them to not use pesticides. You might start talking to neighbors, you might build some community with your neighbors because you might have extra in the way. You're eating, you're probably going to try and eat more vegetables. Like if you plant something, you're going to want to try and eat the thing that you grew, even if you're not like a fan of broccoli. You might still try to eat it if you grew it, that kind of thing. So lots of, again, little benefits.
Yeah.
yeah, and again, I think it all depends on how you go about it. Some people say, oh, you make the joke that like, oh, you spend all this time and money to grow like one tomato, but again, like it depends on where you source your stuff, who you're working with on your garden. I think if you take it out of like the small garden, bring it to like agriculture as well. Like agriculture in itself is very unsustainable, but there are practices that you can implement to make it more sustainable and more return some of that wildland back that we've taken away to make way for agriculture. So, I mean, you can apply those same principles on a small scale in your own garden, I think.
Nicely said. The only thing I was going to add when I was talking about the question was just thinking of pollinator gardens, because I studied bumblebees. So it's like, yes, lots of friendly pollinator plants in cities where there's, concrete and nothing for bees to pollinate or survive off of. So gardens are great for bees. Plant plants for bees.
Yeah, you're literally creating these mini wildlife corridors for these different populations to connect, and that helps with biodiversity.
Yes. And you need pollinators for your garden. So, like I said, a good gardener plants for the bees too, because it not only helps you, but also the environment.
Yep. Rising tide raises all ships. And with that, we're going to take another quick break, and we'll be right back with Outside of Science. Stay tuned.
Hey, if there's any guys out there just looking for a brotherhood, or instigate a Greek life, come talk to Kappa Sig. You can always find the brotherhood on Instagram at Kappa Sigma Opsil. You know, we hold weekly events, have fun, and weekly meetings. Come join the Kappa Sigma Brotherhood. You can always find us on Instagram again at Kappa Sigma also.
And we're back. And now it's time for Outside of Science, that segment where we talk about things, you guessed it, outside of science to prove that we're in fact not robots that do schoolwork and research and work all the time. So, Becky or James or Jen, what have we been up to in the world of outside of science that you'd like to share with the audience?
Well, me and Jen, we recently went to Wisconsin for the Midwest Outdoor Leadership Conference,
Ooh,
which was super fun.
that's cool.
It was hosted by the University of Wisconsin-Madison. They have like this literally a whole property that just has cabins and stuff on it, which I thought was
Nice.
super cool. Also much bigger school than UMSL, so. But yeah, it was really cool to just meet other people in that space, and also get to go to Wisconsin. Never been to Wisconsin, so.
The
Did you get
North
some-
Woods.
Did you
Right, right.
Did you get some cheese while you were there?
We didn't. I'm kind of upset that we didn't, but
I'm
That's-
so disappointed by the world's largest Culvers. It's
Yeah.
just a regular Culver.
yeah, there was a billboard for the world's largest Culvers, and we were so excited. And then it was just like a normal Culvers. I'm like, how is this? Maybe it's like a foot larger, but
Now you know.
Great. There are some. Wisconsin does have the world's largest blankety blank, like in a lot of places. If you go to Hayward, you can see the largest muskie, which is a giant
Okay.
fiberglass fish that
interesting.
you can walk around in.
You get to go inside of the fish.
Yeah, there's stairs you can walk up into its mouth.
It was cool. One thing I will mention though, I mean, this is off of science, but taking it back to science, if you'll notice right now, it's like there's Bradford pear trees blooming all over the side of the roads. There's honeysuckle, and I thought Wisconsin did a really good job of like clearing those out. And maybe
Nice.
it's not as apparent up there, like the honeysuckle invasion, but you could see where they're working to like cut that stuff down on the side of the
cool.
roads, which I feel like Missouri sadly doesn't do. They just kind of let all those pear trees grow. And
I think MDC is currently hosting a buyback for pears.
yes, I've
So,
seen that. So if you have a stinky Bradford pear tree outside,
rotten
cut it
fishy
down.
tree.
and they'll give you a free tree. So
Nice. How about you, Becky or Jen? Anything of note?
Finished my book that I was reading last week.
Cool.
So the In the Lives of Puppets. It was very good. Can
Nice.
recommend. And then I'm still drowning in dog stuff. Too much dog stuff. That's it.
Okay. I feel like I don't have anything. I feel like I've just been planning for things coming up that'll be exciting to talk about on the next show.
right.
But right now, I'm like, yeah, there's not a lot going on. Like, the potluck is the big thing that's happening at the end of the week for the bio department. Speaking of which, James and Jen, and if you want to invite Katie, Mike, the bio department is having a meet out potluck on Friday from 1 to 2:30 in Benton 104.
Okay.
So if y'all want to come,
We
you're
love
more than
that.
welcome to. If you want to bring
Yes.
Katie, Mike, you're also more than welcome to, or other
Okay.
sustainability people. It's the first time we're doing this, so I don't know if it's going to work or not. So
Okay.
the more the merrier.
Do y'all need anything? Like, should I bring cookies?
Whatever you want to bring that doesn't have meat is fair game.
Okay. Awesome.
Our advisor and our boss, Katie Mike, is vegan and talks a lot about like meatless Mondays, trying to make that a thing. So we're very on board with the meatless idea.
Okay. Yeah, we're trying it out. So we don't normally have a biology department potluck in the spring, so we're trying to start one. So we'll see how it goes. But yeah, you're more than welcome to come.
Okay. You said it was Friday.
Friday 1 to 2:30 in Benton 104.
Okay.
This Friday.
This Friday, yeah, because it's a forced like before the break, before everyone scatters to the wind.
Okay.
But yeah.
Okay, bye.
Okay, bye. I mean, that's some people email me like, "This sounds awesome, but I'm leaving, so I'm not going to be there." How about you, Jen? Do you have anything you want to share, or still planning for things in the future?
All my stuff was related to science. I guess the only.
Oh, it's related to nature. That's fine. It's not outside of nature.
Yeah, I got a new fish tank.
Okay.
At the Gender Studies Lounge. Had this nasty old fish tank that no one wanted, and no one wanted to have the responsibility of coming into an office to take care of an animal. So I just lugged it out to my car right before this, and I forgot that I had all of the gardening tools from
Oh
our
no.
honeysuckle hack. So I tried to shove they had this really nice like fish tank cabinet, and of course I took that as well, and I managed to Tetris that thing right in there over all the loppers. And
Did it have fish with it, or was it just?
No,
the
it was
tank.
just the tank. It was
Okay,
just a
okay.
dried, crusty old tank that I spent the whole weekend cleaning.
We'll reach out to Humphrey. She might
Yeah.
have a beta fish for you
Yeah.
this semester.
Sustainable.
Right, right.
All right, I think we're about out of time, so I have to wrap up the show. So thank you so much for listening this week to That Science and Nature Show. We are going to go on a bit of a hiatus for about a month, unfortunately. So next week is spring break, and the 2 weeks after, the graduate students are very busy with lots of guest speakers coming in. So we will return on April 16th. So it's about a month away. So you have a bit of a cool down from That Science and Nature Show. But fear not, we have a great slew of 3 or 4 more episodes for the rest of the semester. Some more fun guests to come on, talk about a lot of good science and nature topics as usual. But thank you so much for listening. Thank you, as always, to Becky. Thank you to you, Jenn and James, for coming on the show again. It was
Yes,
lovely to
thank
have you. Remember, you can find past episodes of That Science and Nature Show on Spotify and Amazon. My name is Jeremy Howard. You've been listening to That Science and Nature Show, and we are out.